Well, welcome to this Monday morning course of this real course for FaceTime Video Call Basics. So I'm excited to share with you kind of tricks of the trade, how to make a FaceTime call. It's not too complex, but sometimes there are just little steps woven in there. So we are going to walk through the whole process, talk a little bit about why video calling is so significant and can be just a really important addition to the way you communicate with your loved ones and friends, because people these days seem to be kind of scattered all over the place, or even if they're close by but you can't get out to go see them, this is a nice way to really sort of improve your communication options. So I am Jessie Riley, the Resident Technology Manager here with Holland Home, and so I'm excited to share this information. So how many have used video calling before? Have either of you? Nope. All right, very good. So and it's something that more and more people are starting to use, but I think we're so used to just calling people on the phone, and now oftentimes people are texting, but there can be limitations with those forms of communication. So, and there's lots of video calling options. So if it's the holidays right now, so you might hear family talking about Skype and FaceTime calling. And if you have family that lives overseas, there's an app called WhatsApp, and that's a way for you to, for free of charge, you can text message and video call people in other countries. So, it's a really cool option. I went to England back in September, and that was a really slick way for us to communicate with the dog sitter and people back at home. As long as we had Wi-Fi connection, we were able to use that. So there's also Zoom, which is a video conferencing platform, and then there's FaceTime. And so FaceTime is what we'll focus on today. It's too much to kind of go over everything, but FaceTime is that is part of the Apple platform. So that's kind of the one big thing to know right off the bat is that this was developed by Apple, so it is specific to Apple devices. So if you're somebody that doesn't have an a Mac computer or an iPhone or an iPad, then FaceTime is definitely something good to learn about, but not necessarily something that you would be able to integrate without any of those devices. So just kind of keep that in mind, especially we'll get into what you need to know when calling somebody else, but you need to have one of those Mac devices in order to use FaceTime. But the coolest piece is that it's free. So once you have those devices, it's a really free and easy way to stay connected. And what I like to point out first, because I think it's always important to not just look at the technology and why we're using it, but also to look at the bigger perspective and look at the different components of wellness. So when we think of video calling, what's the first component? If you think, okay, I'm engaging a component of wellness right now, what's the first component of wellness you think of that you're engaging when you're going to video call somebody? Yeah, social. Yeah, you're socializing. You're connecting with another person. You're having that meaningful connection. So social is really kind of that primary piece. But then if you start to think about it a little more, you can also weave in the intellectual discovery, because if this is something that you haven't used before, you're learning a new process, and so you're walking through integrating a new skill set into your day-to-day life. And then we're also looking at emotional well-being at the same time. That we're going to talk about it a little bit more, but that ability to connect visually with somebody can really help improve that emotional well-being, especially as we walk into wintertime and that starts to feel a little more secluded and isolated, especially if you're somebody that stays in Michigan with all of the winter weather. And so from there, as you engage those areas and you feel better, you're more likely to get out and be physically active. And then in the end, you can have greater spiritual fulfillment because of your just ability to connect and stay connected with those around you. So it's really a blended experience of those wellness components. So when we look at digital connection, we know that staying connected is important, and recent studies have shown that video chatting significantly reduces the risk of depression, specifically. So Oregon Health and Science University studied efficacy of 4 digital communication platforms. So that was video chat, email, social media networks, and instant messaging. And instant messaging being, if you use FaceTime, there's an ability to kind of message somebody, not send them an email, but just send them a quick little message. So that's what they're talking about there. But of all the platforms studied, when older adults utilized video chatting, they had almost half of the probability of depressive symptoms. So, so video chatting has some really, really special features that give you some incredible wellness benefits. So what is the difference? What makes FaceTime different? And it's the video calling helps to improve communication and reestablish those relationships. So during a video call, you're seeing somebody else's body language and those facial expressions. And that's a significant factor to overall communication. So like I mentioned earlier, texting has become a real big part of how we communicate with people. Anybody here text with grandkids or kids? Yeah, so when you text, have you ever run into a situation where somebody says something and maybe you're not 100% sure the intonation that might be behind that text message? Like, oh, are they upset with me? Are they frustrated? And so you lose that part of communication. You don't see the body language. You don't hear intonation. And video calling really helps to bring that full circle. You can see that person, and so it really increases that opportunity for meaningful connection with family and friends. One story I always like to tell is that on my grandfather's 90th birthday, he always liked devices and things to tinker with. So we got him an iPad, and that was something that he was always kind of interested in, and so we got him all set up. And at that time, our son was about a little younger than 2 years old, and my grandfather lived in Charlevoix, so about 3 hours away from here. And we were able to, now that he had an iPad, we were able to FaceTime at least 3 times a week. And so that was an incredible way for him to see our son, to hear him, to watch him play. So it's not just that conversation that you can have with somebody, but we were able to flip the screen around and have him watch Jackson play in the playroom, play outside. He wasn't able to get out and drive down to us, and we moved to a new house. And so we just gave him a video tour of our new house. So it creates a lot of really cool opportunities that you might not have otherwise. All right, so we're going to get started with how to do this. Okay, well, there's some larger print ones over here. So yeah, we can always kind of blow up the print a little bit. So as I mentioned, FaceTime is specific to Apple products, so that's just something to really keep in mind. And there's 3 platforms that you can that are sort of the main ones. You're looking at your iPhone, an iPad, and a MacBook. So that's like the desktop computer or a laptop computer. You do have to have an Apple product in order to FaceTime. Okay. And down the road, so as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, there are a lot of other video chatting. So if you don't have an Apple product, I will be at a later date and time talking about how to do video chatting on those. But today is just specific to FaceTime, okay? You are welcome. So FaceTime can be used with a couple different connection methods. So you can have a Wi-Fi connection or a cellular connection on one of these supported iOS devices. And that's kind of what I wanted to give you a screenshot and just to show you what it looks like on each. It's very similar. So if you're somebody that uses Apple products, they do a pretty nice job at creating continuity between their devices. But you can see on the iPhone and the iPad, that icon is the same, that app is the same. But if you switch over to the MacBook, it's just a little bit different. It has that little phone in a circle on the side. So Just be kind of aware of that. But it's nice. You can use it with Wi-Fi or cellular connection. So you have some options there. So I would like to put a few things to note first. It allows you to make video calls and audio calls to individuals with a Mac or an iOS device. So one thing to really keep in mind is that the person you're calling needs to also have an Apple product. So if there's somebody that has an Android phone and they don't have an iPhone, that call is not going to be able to go through. They need to be set up with FaceTime, and we're going to walk through what it looks like to set yourself up with FaceTime, but just keep that in mind as well. If you're calling somebody who's going to use FaceTime on their Mac computer, this is always just a little bit of a limitation. It's not a big deal, but I always like to point it out, and it seems just a little silly to me, but it is the way it is, and I don't work for Apple. So if you're calling somebody that's using a Mac computer, they need to have the FaceTime app open on their computer. Unlike if you have an iPhone or an iPad, you don't need to be at the ready and have your app open. That call will just come in. But if you're using a computer, that app needs to be open on the computer in order for the call to come in. So just keep that in mind as well. And you have all of this on those slides in front of you. So, and I'm always around for questions as well. Whoa. All right. So this was, I gave this presentation at Braybrook about a month ago. And so these are a couple of new slides, but I felt like they were really important. We won't spend too long, but I just like to point it out. And if you have questions following the presentation, I'm happy to stick around and kind of answer your questions and walk through things. The key to getting started with FaceTime is making sure that your Apple ID is set. So an Apple ID, if you're not familiar with it, is an account used to access all of Apple services. So that's iCloud, the App Store, iTunes, kind of your gateway into using Apple products. And so it includes an email and a password. When setting up an Apple ID, you have to make sure that the email address that you're using to set up your account is an actual live email account that you can access. I know sometimes, we're asked for our email all the time, and I'll be the first person to admit I have an email account that I haven't accessed in 5 years. But if somebody needs it in order for me to get access somewhere, I just kind of give them this sort of fake email address. But for Apple, you do need to be able to get in, because as you're setting things up, their security is set up in a way that it'll send you a confirmation, and so you're going to need to be able to get into that email address. So I always just like to point that out. Your Apple ID will include contact information, payment information, security details. It is really your golden ticket to using your Apple products. And it allows you to manage everything from a single account. So if you have an iPhone and an iPad and different Apple products, it allows you to sync them all together. And if you're somebody that has Apple products, this is old news. You know why this is really helpful. And then when you're logging onto your devices, just make sure you're logging in under the same Apple ID so you don't confuse yourself and things start looking kind of weird. But I can always answer questions about Apple ID because sometimes it can get a little confusing. So when you're getting ready,
You want to wait for questions until the end?
I can do a quick question right now.
Well, what I'm having trouble with is I've used your email address so much.
Mm-hmm.
And now and then you change the password,
Yes.
but only on that one. And then you've got about 6 of them out there with different passwords.
Yep.
And I couldn't find the right password.
Yeah, that can be
So
really
I have to
challenging.
change that.
Yep. Yeah, you need to make sure that, for your email, if you change the password to get in on one device, that you keep it consistent everywhere you go.
That's hard to do.
Yeah, it is hard to do, and I can kind of help you later with some strategies to keep the passwords all in line, because that can be really cumbersome sometimes. So yeah, it's a good point. So when you're creating an Apple ID on your device, does everybody here have an Apple ID that they use consistency? Okay, you do now. And it's okay if you don't.
Or the device.
What was that?
Are
an
Do
ID,
you have an Apple ID, or how do you know if you have one or not?
chances are you probably have one. If you already have an Apple product, it's
But I've
probably
had an
set up.
iPhone, yeah.
Yep, when you set up your device, you probably had one set up. Every once in a while, I will work with a resident who is using their device, but it just wasn't set up in the beginning. So we'll walk through these steps kind of quickly, but there's a way to check and see, and we can look afterwards to see if you do have one set up. But if you're setting it up on your Apple device, so your iPhone or your iPad, you're going to go in through the App Store. You'll tap on the little profile picture, which is that little gray person picture up there. And then you're just going to tap Create New Apple ID, and it's circled at the bottom. And that's going to walk you through the steps of creating a new ID. And if you're somebody that just can't remember your password for your ID, and that can kind of be a stressful situation, there's an icon there in the middle of the screen. And that's why it's really important to have an email address that you are able to access, because they're going to send you a confirmation code that you'll enter into your phone. So, if for your iPad and your iPhone, to access your Apple ID, you'll go through the App Store. And if you're somebody that uses a Mac computer, so a laptop or a desktop, then you'll create your Apple ID through the App Store as well, but it just looks slightly different. So when you open up the window, in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see Sign In, and that's circled in red. And then the window in the center of the page will pop up, and from there you'll just click Create Apple ID, and that will walk you through all of the steps you need. So just a little bit different, but you are always accessing it through the App Store. So far, so good? All right. Now we'll kind of get into the fun stuff. We're done with the housekeeping end of things. So step one, when getting started with FaceTime. So you want to make sure that the FaceTime app is turned on. And this is sometimes a step we miss because we just kind of assume like it's on there, we're good to go. But you actually, before you start FaceTiming, you need to go in through your settings app. So that's one that's highlighted in the center there. It looks like a little cog wheel. You'll tap on that and you're going to scroll down through the next screen. And then you'll tap on FaceTime. Once you're in there, and so now we're looking at the third picture over, you'll just want to make sure that where it says FaceTime, that little toggle switch is moved over to show green. And that's going to mean that FaceTime is on and active. So the little ball will be to the right of that little switch. If it's over to the left, it won't be highlighted green at all, and that means it's off. So you just slide it over, it'll turn on, and that's all you have to do. And you only have to do that once. So this isn't a process you need to walk through each time you want to make a FaceTime call. This is just kind of that initial step. All right. So step two is opening the app on your device. So we're looking for the app picture. So just kind of a highlight here. The iPhone, the iPad, they both look like the app icon on the left. And then the Mac computer, that icon just looks just a slightly different with that little white circle with a phone in it. And just pointing out real quickly, once you've confirmed that settings step that we just walked through, this step two would actually end up being your step one. This is where you would start. If you're ready to go make a FaceTime call to somebody, you open up the app. So far, so good? Sort of, okay. All right, so now we're gonna move into step three and step four.
What was three?
Two? So when you're first starting out, step two was just locating the app on the main screen of your device. And so for our purposes of just making sure that the app is turned on, this is step two. But once you have your settings all set, this is technically step one. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is what it'll look like when you open it up. You'll see, especially if you haven't made any FaceTime calls before, you'll see a largely blank screen. So don't get thrown off by that. That's just like if you were to look at the call log, like the actual telephone call log on your phone. When you first got your phone, there were no calls that had been made, most likely on your phone. So there wasn't a log of anything to follow. So don't worry if it doesn't show much on the page. What you're going to look for once the app is open is you are going to click the blue plus sign in the upper right hand corner. And so we've got two screen images here. We're looking at the one on the left. So you'll tap that plus screen in the upper right hand corner. And what that's going to allow you to do is to begin typing the name, email address, or phone number of the person you wish to contact. So if you choose to enter a name, that information is actually being pulled from your contact list on the phone. So if you're used to texting somebody, if you start typing in Donna, your phone's going to automatically start auto-populating a list of names that are similar to what you're typing in. So that process will probably seem similar to you to other parts of your phone. If you're calling somebody who's using a Mac computer, again, just give them a heads up, give them a quick call or a text message. It seems counterintuitive that you'd have to call them to tell them you're going to call them, but they need to make sure that they have the app open on their computer. And then once you start entering a phone number, it's going to give you, and I'm going to step up here. After you tap this, you're going to get this little field is where you'll start entering information at. It's also going to give you another plus sign. If you tap that, it will take you directly to your contacts. And it's going to show you all the information within your contacts. So if you don't want to type out something and you'd rather scroll through your contacts and select somebody, tapping that second plus sign is going to give you that option. Okay? And now we're going to make our call. So once that person has been selected, you'll tap the name, and this is the screen that will pop up as you're calling somebody. So it's going to look kind of similar to a telephone call, except if you're holding it up in front of you, you're going to see kind of a mirror image of yourself. So don't get thrown off by that, but you'll have that red circle in the bottom, and then you'll have a little camera image and that microphone, and it's going to say it's calling somebody. You'll get a dial tone that will start ringing back at you. And whoever you're calling, their name will be at the top of the screen. And once that person answers, depending on the device that you're using, the screen will open up and it makes a little bit of a connection sound, so you know that you've made a connection with somebody. And so the screen will pop open. The person that you called, they're going to be in the larger view, obviously, because you called them. You don't want to be looking at a large image of yourself. You want to see their face. So, and then you'll be up in the upper right hand or left hand corner in a smaller view. So you can see what they're seeing just for point of reference. And then in the lower part of the screen, you see you have a couple options there. So on the iPhone, you've got, let's see, effects, mute, and it says flip. And so the icon next to that red X is flip, and what that means is it's going to flip the camera. So you're kind of in selfie mode, I guess you could call it, with the camera facing you, using the camera out the front of your device. But if you wanted to flip it and say, show them a piece of artwork on the wall, you can just hit flip and it's going to automatically flip that screen, so they're going to see out the back of your device. And then when you're ready to bring it back to you, you can hit it again and it'll flip back around to you.
Is that the flip?
Yeah, so it's right.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. It's not very clear. So flip is right here.
That one.
Yep, so flip is right next to the end button, so just be careful when you're pressing buttons that you don't hang up on them. But it gives you a couple options. If for some reason you needed to mute the call, mute them, you could hit mute. And then effects give you some options to I don't know, get kind of fancy with what they're seeing. I guess put a funny face on you or change the background color and things. But if just having a nice call with somebody is really what you're going for, then I wouldn't worry too much about effects. You can get fancy later on. And then when you're ready to end the call, you simply just need to press the red button just like you would on a regular phone call, and that will wrap up the call for you.
If you do a fax, all you'll do is laugh the whole time and you won't talk.
See, yeah, exactly. If you do effects, then somebody's going to end up with dog ears and a dog tongue, and then that, and if you're talking serious business, it won't come across as serious anymore. So, yeah, it's a very good point. So if you're receiving a FaceTime call, I always like to put this slide in here because you might not be the one calling all the time, and so it's kind of important to know how to pick up the phone. And it's going to look very, very similar to receiving a phone call on your device. So I put a locked screen version and an unlocked screen version. And you may or may not have sort of recognized this in the past, but when your device is locked, so my screen is black right now, it would come in as that first version over to the left, where you have to slide to answer. But if I had just been on my phone, setting it down, and it was open, then you'd get a red dot and a green dot, and that's considered the unlocked screen. So it just kind of depends on which version your screen is in. But if your screen is locked, you just slide it over to the right, and if your screen is unlocked, then you just press the green accept button, and the call will open right up. If you're somebody that's using a MacBook, once your app is open, in the upper right-hand corner, you'll have a little box that'll open up. And very similarly, you will see who is calling you, and then it gives you an accept and a decline. And you would just click on one of those, depending on what you were wanting to do, and that'll open the call up or decline it. And you'll hang up on some of it. But sometimes that happens. Sometimes it's just not a good time, and you need to call them back later. But just remember, if you're somebody using an iPad or an iPhone, you don't have to have the app open. That call is going to come right through, just like it would a regular telephone call. With that MacBook, you need to have the app open and ready to receive the call. Any questions? Yes.
Will this fit in with all the, like the Amazon, Alexa, you know, because with the show you can do FaceTime on there?
Yep. Yeah, you
Can
can.
you use one-on-one, because like my daughter has a show, so
Mhm.
we can talk that way.
Yep.
But she does not have an iPhone.
Yeah, so with the Amazon show, so she's talking about Alexa, and we can kind of, I won't get too deep into it, but if you're somebody that has an Alexa, there are versions of that personal assistant device that actually have a touch screen similar to that of an iPad, and you can actually do video calls through that. It's on a different platform, but we can, I can definitely show you how to do that, and we can walk
But
through.
it
But
is
yeah,
doable.
but it is doable. Yeah,
Okay.
yep, yeah. That's one of the benefits of that particular device is it gives you that option to do those calls. So, yeah, absolutely. All right. And there's sometimes, it's technology, so I feel like sometimes it just doesn't go as planned. You know, you feel like you got all systems go, and then you're struggling. So, so there are some really common struggles I always like to point out. If you have poor internet connection, and that goes for Wi-Fi or data, and it goes for both the caller and the recipient. So you could be sitting in your apartment, have perfect internet connection through your Wi-Fi, have zero reason for there to be bad connection, but if they have poor connection on their end, the call is going to be no good. Most likely, it'll either just kind of cut off and you'll drop the call, or it'll be really garbled and hard to understand, kind of skip around. So just make sure that you have a solid connection for both of you, and if it seems like you are okay, but the call is still kind of messing up, it's probably their internet connection, and you guys just kind of need to regroup, and they need to find a better connection. But I always like to point out it does go for Wi-Fi or data. So know that. If you have an invalid Apple ID, and there's a way to see if your Apple ID is valid, if you're using your device on a regular basis and you're having no problem, then don't worry about this at all. But if you're somebody that's like, oh, I have an iPad, but I haven't used it in 3 years, and I just want to start using it again, you may have some struggles with your ID. So I included a website to go to see if your ID is valid. But I will stick around afterwards. If you have any questions about your Apple ID, please feel free to stop by and let me know, and I'm happy to walk you through, and we'll get you moving in the right direction. And then, of course, make sure that FaceTime is activated on your device. And we'll walk through those steps. That was step number 1. Because if you go and tap the app and it's not activated, it's not going to let you make a call, and that can be really frustrating. So I want this to be a successful experience for you all. So kind of keep those things in mind. Those are typically some of the biggest struggles there when using FaceTime. And now the next big question is, who will you connect with? Now that you've been given this course and FaceTime calls, is kind of the world is your oyster as far as who you want to connect with. So whether that's grandchildren, children, it's really exciting. We're kind of at a newer time when more and more medical providers are starting to do video conferencing and connecting with people. So becoming familiar with how to do video calls is really an incredible skill set to start working with, so that as we kind of advance further, if you're sick and you don't have to go to the doctor and all you have to do is just video call them, that saves you so much time, so much angst getting out. So I really encourage everyone here to at least try a FaceTime call here in the next couple weeks. I'm at the Ridge every other week. I'll be back after the holidays for Tech Talk. So if you ever have any questions, you can feel free to sign up for a time and we can walk through it and do some practice calls. You can call me, I can call you, and we can kind of get you to a well-oiled machine status. But any questions overall regarding this?
How about the cost of all this? Does it affect your phone?
Yeah, it's a great question. FaceTime is completely free, so it doesn't affect your cost. The only thing I would say is that if you're somebody that's using cellular data, so if you have an iPad that when you take it out into the middle of nowhere, there's no Wi-Fi connection around, you can still connect to the internet. That means you have data that you're paying for every month. Just know that FaceTime will kind of burn through your data a little bit quicker than, say, like hopping on Facebook and cruising around that way. It does pull data more, so when you can connect to Wi-Fi, I always encourage people to do that, because Wi-Fi, by and large, is free. I mean, you're paying for it each month. If you're somewhere where you're not paying for it, that just helps save your data for other things. Because FaceTime does, because it's video, it does pull some of that. But other than that, there's no...
So if you have Wi-Fi in your apartment,
Yeah.
you have your own router and all that
Yeah.
stuff,
You should be okay. Yeah, you should be okay. Yep, it's a tool that Apple developed that's specific to their device. So you should be okay. There's not like a monthly FaceTime charge, or you don't get charged per call or anything like that. Yeah, so cost-wise, there's no reason not to. Yeah.
Two observations. One, you have Wi-Fi, of course, if you pay for it,
Yeah.
or maybe
Mhm.
via your Comcast, but everyone does not have Wi-Fi.
Correct.
So if you can make a pitch to the leadership, go for a Wi-Fi in all
Yes.
the apartments.
Absolutely. So what I can tell you about Wi-Fi for all of our Wi-Fi for all is that they are actively looking at it right now. They know that it's an important factor for the campuses, just for residents, for operations, kind of across the board. So they are actively looking at the space, figuring out a game plan, so that can be something that's implemented here in the near future. So That's kind of the extent of my knowledge of where they're at, but do know it's not just sort of like, oh, we should do that someday. We're kind of beyond that point, and they're looking at ways to implement it. So,
They want the next generation to live here, they're gonna have to have
Yep.
it.
Yeah, they definitely, and they recognize that. The other thing though, if you're somebody that doesn't have Wi-Fi in your apartment, or you know somebody that doesn't have Wi-Fi in their apartment, Holland Home does have a guest network, so a Wi-Fi network in common space. So, so it works in the bistro, I think it works down here. So if they want to get out, it doesn't stretch too far into resident apartments. But if they struggle with no Wi-Fi, they can come into spaces like this and connect with the free Wi-Fi.
And that's secure.
It is not password secure. Nope. So you wouldn't want to be, doing your finances through there. But if you're just having a phone call with somebody, I feel like there's always quiet space down here. But yeah, you would want to make sure that the content that you're sharing is something you're comfortable having on an unsecured network.
The other observation is, given the turnout, it
Yeah.
shows again that we older people are afraid to start. So how can you turn us on?
I know,
Not
right?
just-
I know.
not just-
Yeah, I feel like I need to start bringing treats here, start luring people in with food, or I don't know.
The
But
need is there, we want to connect with the grandchildren, but,
yeah.
this is so new, I have people, who don't touch the internet at all.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we're still kind of moving in that direction, but yeah, it's a great observation, and you coming here today, you all can be some of the best stewards for just encouraging people to utilize technology. Let them know that you came here and I didn't bite anybody, and that the technology isn't too crazy. And it does. For some people, it's just a learning curve that's really steep and they're uncomfortable with it. But we'll start doing more and more over the next year of helping to increase that comfort level. And yeah, we'll get there. That I know, yes.
How long should it take for your device to switch from your apartment Wi-Fi automatically into the guest?
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
that's a great
I
question.
find that, like I hear red,
Uh-huh.
all the way up until I get to the bistro.
Yeah,
And I very seldom can find a good place down here.
Okay.
Even in the restaurant.
yeah, sometimes so the question is, how long should it take your Wi-Fi? So if you're in your apartment and you have Wi-Fi, how long should it take for your device to automatically switch over to another network that you've had access to? And I do know down here, sometimes the Wi-Fi can be a little struggling.
It is at the terrace, too. There's
yeah.
some places where it works.
Well, these buildings are just built like tanks, and so Wi-Fi has to travel through space. And so when it travels through steel and concrete, it just gets hung up and doesn't always work as well. So I would say, that connection, it's not going to happen instantly. Give it a couple of minutes to kind of flip over depending on where you are. The internet connection is much better upstairs. It also depends on where you are in relation to the wireless routers and where the signal is actually coming from. And in this building, I'm not 100% sure where that is, but it just might be a little further down here. So it should connect as long as the other network you're moving to is alive and well. It should take no more than just a couple minutes.
The number of people that are trying to connect, let's say, yes,
Yep.
can there ever get to be too many devices on that
Sure.
guest? Yeah?
Yeah. Sometimes there can just be too many. Like if there's a big event happening and everybody's connecting to Wi-Fi, it kind of uses up the bandwidth of that network. And that can really slow things down as well. It doesn't happen too often, but it is certainly something that can happen. So if you're somewhere, not even home related, if you're downtown at a big event or a big museum and they say they have free Wi-Fi, but you're having a hard time connecting, sometimes they're just kind of maxed out. So yeah, it's not 100%, flawless process, but it works most of the time. But if you have more questions about Wi-Fi, I can give you some of the information that I have regarding it, and I can lead you in the direction regarding the information that I don't have. Yes.
Do you know if Comcast Wi-Fi is better than AT&T?
That I cannot comment on because I don't know.
What if you have neither of those?
Yeah, if you have neither of them, then yeah, it's really, I can only speak to sort of what I do, and I always just see, who has the best price and what you would typically do. One of the things with Wi-Fi is what are you using it for? And oftentimes people will ask you, if you're somebody that's streaming Netflix and doing a lot of that stuff, you want a higher internet speed, and those companies are better to answer that. Yes, Barb?
As a person who has used both AT&T
Oh, okay.
and Xfinity,
Yes.
I will go with Xfinity every time.
Okay,
Really?
so Barb is saying Xfinity over Xfinity over AT&T. So, yeah, I think it's always a mixed bag based on people's experiences, but I ask around, I think, and I trust Barb's feedback back there. So, yeah, it just depends on what you're looking for and the price and all of that. So.
I'm kind of confused about, what is your service gets you? Like, when you want Comcast internet, you have to do something with Comcast. And just paying that monthly fee for Comcast through Howard Home doesn't pay you on the internet. does it?
Right, so that's a good question. So the question is, what is your monthly fee for Comcast get you? So as I understand it, what you receive through Holland Home is your cable TV. So, and then what you pay beyond that is your internet access. So there are typically two versions of internet access. You have like a cable internet access, which is like if you have a laptop, there's an actual like cable plugged into the side of your computer feeding that internet in. And for some people, that's all they need, and that's typically a less expensive option. But then Wi-Fi is your other option, and it's connected into a couple other pieces of equipment, a wireless router, a modem, and that creates a wireless signal. That's a little bit more a month. But those would be things that you would pay in addition to your cable. That's not included in your state.
Should be, if you have internet, I have phone too.
Sure. Yeah.
It should not be more than $75, $78.
Yeah. So.
Get you lower speed, I think, because the lower speed is
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
good enough.
And I'm not, like I said, I don't work for Comcast and I don't claim to know the ins and outs there. So your best bet is to, talk to your neighbors, see what they're using. That'll give you a good sense for what's realistic, and so that, it's not highway robbery or anything. Yeah, well, yeah. So yeah, talk to your neighbors. That's kind of the best source of information. But yeah, your internet is not included in the monthly statement. No.
Tell them you're a senior citizen and you don't have money.
I did, and I got it lowered because I
Me
don't
too.
stream anything, I don't play sports,
That's
I don't
right.
watch movies, I don't do any of that stuff.
Yep.
So I got the price
Good for
down.
you.
Yeah. I mean, they want you to have the service. So.
Yeah, and I don't mind if
See
it's
what you can do. But, well, thank you everybody for coming today. Great questions, great conversation. I will stick around for a little bit, so if you have questions specific to your device or to your situation, happy to help you there. But have a wonderful week. Have a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and enjoy time with your family and friends.